So I just start with some show and tell. I was just actually made a pretty major factor to this. I moved to Firebase off multi-tenancy like literally yesterday. So a couple things like I had to wipe the app and stuff, but I just wanted to kind of generally show you like what it is. So I created a gym and an app for gyms and yoga studios where those folks wouldn't see. It's a multi-tenant application. The tenants are organizations. So if someone logs in only as a super user, we'd see organizations, but it has locations. You can edit the location. Locations have spaces. You can change these up. Yeah, move it to a different location. I just have one. Services. So these are the classes like high intensity interval training. This is a little more involved, but as an object, and then you'll have a schedule of something. So it's a recurring schedule, maybe daily, weekly. It'll tell you like what the next 10 occurrences are. So you can kind of understand, a lot of flexibility in terms of the recurring. And then a back-end job will take the bookable service and the schedules and generate sessions. And so those are the things that you would see on a calendar. So I literally just generated all this like 15 minutes before the call. So I just wanted to put some stuff on there and for you to see just generally what I'm doing. And there's also a mobile app. This is fake data. This is real data. And I can switch between the tenants. I just started working on the mobile app part of it. There's four projects. One is the shared types that I use across the projects because you just saw there's the web for the administrators, there's the mobile app for the users, and then there's the API backend that's used by both apps, and then finally there's the shared types. So one thing that you can just see the four projects here. So there's the mobile, the web, and the shared types. Maybe that goes better there. The shared are used by both. So I just wanted to kind of give that quick overview just to see like, and so everything you just saw was only me starting January 3rd. And I'm also helping 2 other startups. So like I try to do this every day, but I'm also working on a couple other projects. But I've also been able to use Windsurf for those other projects as well. So I jump in the middle of projects when I'm using it. I think I'm going to do some show and tell on the AI here. Like I don't have bookings yet. I have bookings to find, but I just thought I could show you how I do it. I'm going to get rid of the split view for now. So I have an object, bookings. Sorry, my schema. And I'll just say that anything you can do to create structure is going to help a lot. So, the definition of the schema being readily available to the AI, using a type system, like it's going to generate, you'll see a bunch of these types. Here's, let me see if I have any types open as an example. Yeah. So here's some types that like it helps with this is organizational account schema. This is essentially a member of a staff member of an organization, what it might look like in terms of an update versus an insert, and even error and success responses, different types in here. So, and 95% of this was generated, but the benefit is that if you have something with types, and structure, it's just going to be the AI, I think, can do better. It has more to grab onto, essentially. And they just added that MCP capability. I don't know if you saw, Brian. It's like now in the generally available option. Like they just added this. I haven't set up any MCP servers. All right, so I have. I guess the other thing I could show is just my database schema. Actually, use some AI here as well. I put in human sentences like the relationship between all the entities. I wrote it in both directions. If it's one to many, many to one, actually wrote that. And then there's a generate diagram. I put all that text in there, and it generated a good portion of this diagram. And then from there, I was like, got into the details. But for a booking is basically what someone would do if they have, once they see a session on that calendar, and they want to book it and go to that class. So I'm going to show you how I generally would interact. So it's like, okay, I want to create.
Hey, sorry, David, do you mind if I go back just a second here? Can you go back to that diagram?
Oh, yeah.
So
potentially, there it is.
Did you create this entire thing from scratch, or did you do the text on the left and then do the generate diagram, or like?
Yeah, I put this text into this thing. It said draw me a diagram, and still has like the last time I ran it, I guess, in here. And then I hit generate.
And it created the entire schema for you, basically.
Yeah. It created a visualization of the schema.
And you could, for all intents and purposes, potentially feed this into, especially as we're looking at MCP now, you could feed this into like a MySQL server.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
go build me the database schema for this stuff, right?
Yeah, let me see here if there's a type. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I could do. I have a screenshot capability. I mean, I probably could do something like take a screenshot, and move this over to the other thing, and say, all right, there you are. And I can drag that image over here. Say, can you please add the this model to my @schema Prisma file? So you can give it input of images for stuff like this. I'm sure there's an even cooler way to do it, but I just thought that would be a good opportunity to show how this works with multimodal. And so it edited the file, and you can either click right on the file and it'll open it up. You can see what it did. Usually it has open a diff. Didn't do what I thought I was going to do.
Yeah, I thought it would have diffed on. Oh wait, there it is. It's down below, right? It's got the green on the left hand side there. Like that's the new stuff, right? I've noticed that sometimes it does get a little funky in terms of like the accept or reject. Sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't. Anyways, I get it.
Profile. I don't see it here. I might need to restart. Do it again. I don't see your changes.
Is that not it on line 292?
That's just my existing. Well,
Yeah,
I
It
did
was
user.
added 31 seconds
Oh,
ago.
you're right. Yeah, it is because my actual user account is called organizational accounts, and I also have members, so that is the new one. Just didn't see the. Okay. Oh, interesting. It's like it's even adding it as a reference to the organization, just pretty interesting.
So it picked up on that.
There
And
we
so
go.
it picked up on that and realized it automatically needs to add it to the organization as well.
Yeah, it kind of went above and beyond there. Like I don't think I would want it to do that, but it also knows stuff about. It already knows about. Like it read the whole. You can see that it analyzed the schema, like all 200 lines first. So it probably made some assumptions there, and then each of these you can reject. So like I'm just going to reject all here because I've implemented this differently. But I thought that would be a good example. But I could also, let's see, I do have the booking already here, and I could do Control L. Now Control L, you can see it did the at schema.prisma pound line numbers. So you can also do context there. You know, if you're in code, you could say something like, add try catch around this. You can do things in context of the file and the lines. So here I'll just say, please create the type file for booking. Please use at, I think some of my best examples would be sessions, types, and I'll do schedule. So here I think of it as like a really extremely knowledgeable junior developer. So I think anyone it seems like everyone here is senior engineers and you've been mentoring software engineers for many, many months and years. And so that skill actually will be really valuable. I think, things that I see typically is like, you'll have a pattern within a project and you'll want people to repeat that pattern. Well, just tell it the pattern you want it to repeat. Like no big deal. If and then you can compare that. You should still look at it, make sure it does the things you want it to do. So but taking small steps, doing the smallest thing, and then adding complexity. Again, structure is really helpful. If there are great examples, then reference those examples. There's this, like it says, start a new conversation. All of this is going in the context, and I think if any of y'all have been using even just ChatGPT, like after a certain amount of time, the context window gets so filled up from the existing conversation that it gets pretty big. So, anytime you're going to start a new task, or you've kind of done something, hit the start new conversation. I'll click on booking. I'll just trust it. I usually just go with it at this point. I could see like why this isn't the case. I'll actually show you something. I'll just accept all. Now when I hit explain and fix, I actually just submitted a bug for this yesterday, or a feature request, because this was actually going to restart the entire context here, which is not. Maybe they have already fixed my request. This used to do like an entirely new context window, and it would lose all the what was happening before, and I would actually, like, to get around it, I would highlight it and use that. If you do Control I, you can do instructions in line, or Control L brings it to the. Control L will kind of do that insert over here to the line number. All right, so then it made some changes, and this is what, I don't know, success response. Typically, what I do in these cases is I'd be like, okay, I told it that I wanted to follow the example from schedule is a recent one. So I'll just see, like, all right, what did they do when it came to the responses? And it looks like we use error response. And so this went, let's see, extended success. Okay, ultimately it's going to do success response booking. But I could say that I wanted, all right, I'm going pretty fast here. I think this does include bookable services. It relates to bookable services. So I don't want to, well, I'm going to delete this afterwards, but I could say, can you follow the response types more closely from at schedule test schedule.ts. So it'll do the analysis again, and then I'll check these out, and oh, I see the difference. Those look simpler. Let me try to make it simpler. And that indeed looks simpler. You know, and it is a better reflection of what I had, like I'm using for my other objects. So that's cool. So let's go on to the next thing. So now what I typically do, I'm big into test-driven development. All right, and so then I'll say like, okay, let's generate the tests for at booking tests, and please use at schedule.test. Good one. My sessions was really good. As an the golden example. So again, it'll analyze that, it'll compare the two, and then I'll look at the two side by side to see how it did. And so some as it's doing it, like you could be like, hey, generate the types and the tests and the routes, like do it all, you know, and it'll do it, but it won't be as good as if you take smaller steps one by one. You know, part of it might be that you're putting stuff into the context each step at a time, but I think in general, if you can take I mean, you know, generating an entire type file in seconds is like, you know, a pretty decent step, and very quick. But trying to ask it to do the entire backend layer is not advisable. You know, you can try it out. That's the stuff you'll learn as you go through this. All right, and so it generated it. It created the tests. I'll just jump into it, and I typically would want to compare it to another one. This actually is my test. It's like a quick job I wrote. So I'll do, I said the schema sessions test. I'll just start with accepting everything for now. And because it's a multi-tenant application for my tests, I create a tenant essentially, and then I do all my insert, updates, deletes, and wipe it out all within that tenant. And so that every test basically runs within its own tenant space, and so I can have seed data separate from that'll stick around, in the same test database as my tests are running. So I found that to be pretty great, because then of course I should be able to run these in parallel in the future. So it's going to replicate some of that, where in the booking test, it's copying what I did in sessions and creates a random ID, and so it creates a test organization, which I want. And I recently just added the multi. It's always been a multi-tenant app, but I actually added the tenant ID within Firebase, so it's complaining there, and I copied the same example because I just did this yesterday. So just need to do that to fix that. But it's creating for the booking, it knows that it needs locations, so it's creating some locations. It's doing it in the before all, and then usually it'll create at least one booking and a test session as well that the booking will run against. And also it's creating a member account. If you look over here, there's not a member account. So it knew from the relationships to create the member account in the test setup. And so these tests are pretty good. I mean, there'll be some that just validate the types, does it have the required stuff, and then it'll get into let's see. So some of these are, I'm not seeing like calls to the API yet. They're all just really like validating the schema. And so I would say, hey, oops. Bookings. These tests. Let's see the tests for the API endpoints that we will create soon. Please follow patterns in sessions test. And like these are over here, I'm actually making calls to the API endpoints. Down here, we're actually starting to hit the API endpoints, and so potentially because it just saw that it knows that I haven't generated the API endpoint, so it's just doing tests for the type validation. But like generally in a day, I can do the create, update, and delete for a new object that'll have type definitions, tests, and front end. All right, and so now it's added these tests, and then obviously I can run these tests, and there should be a lot of failures because the API routes like literally don't even exist yet. Yeah, I've done some Python stuff, and I've done just plain old JavaScript as well. It's been similarly like magical, where I'm like a fractional CTO for this hair salon coaching company, and they had a developer put together this application, and they're like, hey, can you make all these different changes, which seems sensible enough, but they went from front end through back end. Like they used to have, here's the sign up code, and you'd have to generate a sign up code to give to the person, and then they wanted to change that to make it make it a drop down of like, how did you hear about us? And if it's other, then show another field. If it's a referral, then show another field and put the name in there. And I got that done in 2.5 hours. and I didn't work with this code before. Like, I didn't do anything really to the front end. And that was making changes to the front end and back end. Like, I use shortcut, and if you want to put, it's kind of like a Jira or stuff. If you want to, you have a bunch of epics, but if you want to show it on a roadmap, because like once it gets on the roadmap, it's super easy to move stuff around. And but in order to do that, you have to have a start date and an end date. So I created like 35 of these things, and I was like, oh crap, now I got to go back through and in each one individually, like click on it and put the dates. So instead I was like, nope. And I just did it in Python. I just like, write me a script to, and this would be a good, yeah, I might still have it. So let me see if I can open up the folder. I did something similar with this. There it is, shortcut API. Yeah, see. But here I just wish I had the history of the prompts. That'd be cool. But I'm being literal, where I pointed it at I was like, at web. Here's, the API docs for shortcut list all epics is here. And I was like, at web, and I pointed to their API documentation, and I said, and the edit epic API doc is here, and put the URL in for that. And I was like, get all the epics and set the start date and target date. And I literally had it all running. The first time it went through, I said start and end date, and it picked a different date. It's kind of weird. It's called target date instead of end date. And so that's like the one update I had to make, and it worked. So I iterated through, 30, 40 or so of these epics by just setting those two dates. And I ran this cursor script and it's like start to finish, like looking up the API documentations, getting my API token in 15 minutes. So I have used it on like not just types. And I think if you can, this is the stuff that you'll learn as you're doing it. Like, you might have to take different types of steps as you're going through. Like, if there's something where you're like, hey, I want you to copy this, like you can copy that, go to a different file, and say like, use this format. So there might just be some other things that work better if there are fewer types, or maybe you need to take smaller steps potentially, or to point it at like exactly what you're wanting, the patterns that you wanted to replicate. I think I do have some. I have these memories. I think I have some. Where are they? The rules. have some rules that I had created.
Yeah, I think you can hit.
Space rules and okay, looks like that's kind of weird. It looks like they just moved them because you see this where it said set global AI rules and then this manage and but those aren't my rules. Let me see here. Okay. It's just in different okay, it's just different projects. Yeah, so I don't know to be honest. I have there's the mobile, there's the API. Like I know I have somewhere I've specified like I did see in a YouTube video where they kind of recommended putting in like your tech stack into the into some of the rules. So, you know, I did think about like, okay, what is it do I want to use at each of the layers? I did provide instructions on what I'm trying to do for the authentication. And I did talk about how the app has these 4 different parts to it, that there's the API layer, and I'm sure I should revisit this stuff. You know, if there were certain things where I was like, oh, this is really good, I did put it in. Like I did have some of the naming conventions, like, you know, use snake case for this, use title case for that. And these sort of built up over time, you know, as well, where I'm like, all right, I don't want to keep typing this. Like I just want to put this. And sometimes I do have to say like, you know, hey, remember these rules, and I can mention the file, and it'll be like, you're right, I'm not following these rules. So that's what I've done. You can create a bunch of these, and I'd say also I probably have more documents on these projects than I ever had because you know, for the testing thing that like I haven't like I'm saying like follow this, but I can also I was doing this more in the beginning where I was like, as I mentioned in at testing, let's see, testing, you know, please create such and such tests for, you know, at type or something. So I I also did that for different things like endpoints, APIs. I was doing a lot of that towards the beginning because also after you could, what's really great is you could say like, you know, create a markdown file of the application flow from startup on the, you know, to first load on the immersion API project. Or if I just did something where I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm going to touch Firebase authentication for the next like 3 or 4 days or weeks, and let me create some documentation of like what I just did. You know, it's like almost it's as simple as this typically, where it's like, hey, you know, please create some documentation about what we just did and remember the key points, and it'll go back and into its context if it hasn't lost it, and generate this documentation. And like, it's pretty good. It's like better than I would, you know, and it's great to just have something to start with as well. But if someone was coming new to this project and they're like, this is how like it all starts up. And I mean, it's going from the environment variables. It talks about that I have middleware so that every request is going through this middleware file. And it sees that I have CORS checks in here, you know, as well. It talks about how I'm doing the authentication against the JOT tokens. And this wasn't even in my context. Like I just said, do that. You know? So this type of stuff is pretty cool because you can create documentation a lot easier, and it's great for, you know, I'm literally 50 years old, and so like I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, and so if I this quite a bit on these things because I just need to remember later on, like I know it's going to be a thing. Like I use this Prisma reference like all the time where I'm like, oh, these are the commands that I'm gonna need often on the project. And you know, you could check all this stuff in the source code too. And glad you asked about that. Yeah. And it is like, this is what you should do across any single workspace you open up. Like if you're using VS Code and I just jump to that shortcut project and then I jump to this project, back to this project, or if I go to my other thing and I'm like, you know, like they give you some examples, like speak to me in Spanish. Like obviously that's not me, but you know, if there's certain things that you want to be the case every time you open up a project in VS Code or your ID of choice, then just do that. The project specific stuff I think is going to be like, this is what applies every time you open up this project.
Yeah.
I don't even have any global rules. I've just been doing project specific stuff so far. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other stuff that I might talk about over here. No, I mean, most of these are the defaults. I've liked them, and I don't think, you know, they've added now where they show the credit usage. I've been doing a lot of stuff in write mode. When things are really good, I move to chat mode, and with chat mode, it'll still show you the edits that you can see and that you can diff and accept and reject, but it's just, I think it has more, it feels like it has more control over the changes that are made. And, you know, it's like, I was doing something yesterday where I was trying to do a deep link for like, within my iOS emulator where I could pass in a variable, like something that's super simple, of course, with a website, pass in a query param. I was trying to do something like that, and it started making some changes that were like, oh, wait a second, that's a little bit crazy. And so I switched to chat mode and would just like check out each thing it changed. I think it'll also is cheaper on credits. Probably less of a concern for y'all, given the companies doing it. You can, I found Claude 3.5 Sonnet to be just the best. I mean, actually, they just added the Gemini. I do use O3 Mini every once in a while, but usually for like conversations. DeepSeek is interesting. Like it's fewer credits, but it's very verbose, and it doesn't kind of like get to the point as quickly. But it can be kind of fun to do this stuff like this. Another thing that's pretty great is that when you have, because, you know, if you have logs and you just, like if there was an error, you just copy that. And because it has so much context about your project, particularly in the stack trace, if it's showing, I don't have any, how come I can't have errors when I need it? You just put that type of stuff in here and just hit enter, and it'll give you some really good ideas as to what the issues might be. Or if you highlight a section, you're like, oh, you know, I don't know what's going on here. Let's do better debug. And like what it's done for my, you know, some of the statements where it'll just rip through the entire function or the entire file and add debug in all the every single logical path that you can think of. You know, it's almost an immediate accept all. Like it just does a great job at stuff like that. And also, like when I was doing submissions, trying to figure out like those Zod errors, those were sort of getting just caught as exceptions. And I was like, I need to see these errors. I understand like which field is missing, and it provided me excellent debug where it would like really destructure the error objects and print them out if there were certain types. Yeah, because I feel like I've mostly shown you guys some of the bigger stuff, but it's definitely helpful when you're just like, hey, you know, this, just like add try catch around. You can also, it deals with your typos. Like, it's just nuts. This stuff is.
All right, we are closing in, about 5 minutes left. Want to give just a quick opportunity, Daryl, James, any quick thoughts, feedback, questions, or anything?
Daryl, I think had some questions.
Yeah.
I think you've touched on the majority of mine. I mean, I had some more sort of general questions around, you know, you mentioned obviously you're generating a lot of this code automatically from your prompts, and just curious like how deeply you're analyzing that generated code and how are you finding that debugging process. But you kind of did just touch on that a bit. If there's any more you want to elaborate on that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I do have Prettier and like those types of things running on the like the linting stuff is running on it, like on save. I guess you kind of get some of that typical stuff. You know, I am not as strong of a developer as you guys are in this call, so like, you know, it's sort of a judgment in terms of the judgment of how great this code is and could it be better. Like, I'm sure it could be better, but I know that the testing and the debugging, actually even setting up, I got the debugging working where I could actually within VS Code see like in my tests. Now I can just like pick something, and then when I'm in the debug, and I didn't know how to get that to work, but I just work with the chat to like help me get it set up, and like now it works. You know, like now I can actually debug certain stuff. Now, if I'm, you know, this is running locally, and then I have my API. Usually I'm doing integration tests where like my APIs are actually running against a real database in like a test mode. So like that, I don't have like a remote debugger on that guy. And I just mostly am doing debug logs, but it's great though when you do have an issue and you just don't even know where to start, or you're lazy. Like after a while, there's certain things you just trust about it, and I just copy and paste those logs and throw it into the console. I don't even say like fix this error. I just literally cut and paste the logs, and it's like it knows that it's like, oh, okay, these are some things we can try, and sometimes it'll even start updating the code to fix the issue.
Interesting. Yeah, we've had a lot of discussions internally around, you know, just in terms of the combination of setting up general rules across all projects versus rules within individual projects, and how that relates to, as you generate code based on prompts, you know, is it using those best practices? Is it following, you know, your ESLint rules? Is it following, you know, if you have Prettier there? How do you feel personally? Like, what is your trust ratio there that Windsurf and Cascade specifically and Claude are performing and generating those best practices for you?
Yeah, if you have those rules, right, like like the enforcement of those is going to happen outside of it. So I think you're okay there. I would, yeah, I just start getting into it. Like, because now the thing is like, if things are tedious, well, they're not anymore, right? Like, so these are the rules, developers. Like, you gotta do this stuff now. Like, you know, we've been saying like these are the practices that you've been wanting folks to follow. You know, and if you have the best examples are like this repo or these files within these projects are like the ones to replicate, and like these should be the patterns your developer should be using. This is the best way to connect to Kafka or whatever, like now you have something where like, what's your excuse? Like, why are you, all you had to do is like tell it to copy this. Like, you're still going to do code reviews. They're still going to do, these different things that, are going to ensure that it's, at the end of the day, like the code that gets pushed to production is quality stuff. So, it's really just accelerating like anything that's tedious, anything that are best practices that you want to follow regularly, and you just want to implement, like repeat certain patterns. It does help you with, I think in general too, I always have another ChatGPT window and app like open somewhere else. Like sometimes I'll do debugging there and kind of have a conversation where I don't want to lose the context. So I don't think it's going to fundamentally change your core best practices of doing things like code reviews and enforcing linting rules on builds and stuff like that. I think now it should just hopefully be easier for people to do that type of stuff and faster.
Totally understand. It's been an excellent presentation. I really appreciate you, David, showing us and walking us through this.
Web, at document, at files, like you just kind of in control of the context at that point where, and if anytime I'm about to say like, I'm going to mention 2 or 3 files, like I probably can just clear the context because I'm giving it everything I want it to know right now, at that point.
And then asking another question in another area of the application or something, but just you're still referencing the same sort of baseline information documentation about it. So that's helpful for us.
Yeah, and if we talked about Brian's like maybe adding me as a single channel guest, because I you guys are a bigger team, you're more, you have more experience hands-on coding than I do. I've been like practicing, I'm a doctor, but like I'm an actor. I'm not a doctor. Like I'm an actor that plays a doctor on TV, type deal. So I would love to, be able to learn from you guys as like you get into this, and there's certain tips or tricks that you get, or other people are using like Cursor or some of the other things that are coming out, and they're like,
sure.
Oh, they're moving faster. They're doing like great. Like I would love to move, try those out or move to those things. For me, the benefit is hopefully tapping into, a community of folks that are learning and sharing how to improve, like ways that they're improving their workflow, or other tools that are more performant than the ones that we just covered here.
Yep. All right, listen, I do need to bounce here again. David, appreciate the insight. We'll definitely circle back around. If you don't hear from me in the next couple of weeks, let's definitely try and connect somehow. But again, great stuff here. Really excited about sort of how we take this and run with it. And we'll definitely be in touch.
All right, cheers.
Cool. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, David.